the day after. So yesterday I had finished up the ECU and gotten started on the coach harness. And today I thought I would come out and work on the gauge cluster and the keyless entry system, but wound up not getting there. Started dealing with some other things and basically wound up trying to figure out power distribution. Had to decide if I wanted to put the battery in the back here or here, or put it in the front. The factory manual calls for it to be in the front. I don't really like it in the front because you have a really long run for your starter and your alternator. I don't like those long hot runs, so you can put a fuse on the alternator and a relay on the starter. So I bounced back and forth on it. It really would have probably fit pretty nicely right here, but it would have been right up against the exhaust. It's not great for a battery. Could have put it on the other side, but then it might be in the way of whatever linkage I work out for the shifter. Certainly don't want to put it in the passenger's compartment. Might could have tucked it up here somewhere, but once again, right up against exhaust, probably a bad idea. A little better over here. Might could have found a way to tuck it up in there. I had to reroute the cooling hoses. Not nearly as close to the exhaust on this side, the way the exhaust tucks and goes back the other way. But in the end, I decided to stick with the factory location. So the battery is there in the factory spot. There's an old school muscle car style solenoid, which is basically a relay. So this wire going off to the starter is only hot when the ignition hits there. So that wire's dead. It's set for starting, so it's not a hot wire. I got another wire here coming in that's it's not hooked up yet. I'm gonna put another fuse right below that one, and that wire will go back to the alternator. There'll be a fuse on the other end as well, so it'll be fused on both ends. This here is a 100 amp fuse that came with the coach system. Comes off the hot of the battery, and it runs back to the coach system. It's two wires, one that comes in on each side, two number 10s, fed with a number 4. And then the ground comes off there, comes to a disconnect, and then the grounds to the frame down there. And believe it or not, that took most of the day, just basically deciding how I wanted to do that and then actually doing it. A lot of time making all those wires. Big connections take a lot longer to make than the little ones. So I'm not a huge fan of the battery terminals that are there. They're there, but I guess they're kind of El Cheapo, but they're what I had. I may upgrade those down the road. I did jumper some wires around on the coach, fired it up, and made sure some things worked. The other thing I wound up doing today that I forgot to mention was the fuel pump control module. I originally was going to delete the Subaru control module, but then I got to looking at the fuel system itself, and it's set up for a returnless system, factory style. And there were aftermarket fuel rails that the previous owner had bought, and those aren't readily adapted to make a return style fuel system. So I had the Subaru module over there in the box, so I wired it up. So fuel pump used to connect directly to the coach. Now it doesn't. Now the coach feeds the control module, and then the control module feeds the pump, which is buried under all those wires. Ordered all of the AN fittings to plumb the fuel system. So next week I'll be plumbing the fuel system in preparation for our first start. So what I was looking at right now is the fans. I bought a different radiator because the factory unit, which is sitting under there, was too tall. It was sticking up above this bar, and that works for the manual build, but I'm going to be customizing the hood and I needed the clearance. I needed to get as close to this bar as I can with the bodywork, so radiator had to go down. And now I'm too narrow. That's because that radiator over there at the top and bottom tank, and this one has got side tanks, so I gave up 4 inches of width, and now the fans don't fit, so I'll only be running one fan. I will give the factory one a try and see if it cools good enough, and if it doesn't, we'll buy an aftermarket one. So I'm going to wire up the fan and mock it up and figure out how I want to build a shroud and whatnot. I've got a kind of a universal shroud, I think, out back from the Mustang, so I should be able to modify it, I hope, to work with this. And then I'm going to wire up the fan, and then I guess tomorrow I'll try and set up the keyless entry system. The other thing I did, I spent a fair amount of time today, was doing a lot of research on the immobilizer. So for the 2006 Turbo, which is what came with this when I bought it from the guy who bought the kit and the donor, it's the first year of a impossible to defeat immobilizer. Probably not impossible, but not readily available. You have to know how to hack ROMs for ECUs. And it's a little bit out of my area of expertise. Using the immobilizer, you have to have the factory gauge cluster, the factory mobilizer unit, the factory body integrated module, and the factory ECU that are all paired with the same VIN number. Have all that stuff. I really don't want to use the gauge. I really don't want to have the body integrated module tucked away somewhere. So I did a lot of research. There are some aftermarket ECUs you can buy, but the cheapest one was over $1,000. I did a lot of research, and basically it should work as a 2004 Forester ECU. It's supposed to be pretty much identical to the one I've got, except it doesn't have immobilizers. It's for a 2.5 turbo manual transmission. There's a couple of pins that moved, and my understanding is that was theft deterrent, so that somebody couldn't just walk around with a 2004 ECU and plug it in and steal 2006 cars. So I'll move those few pins when the new ECU gets here, probably next week. And then so the immobilizer will be completely gone. I won't have to worry about the security modules. And once I get the new ECU and get the ignition wired up and the fuel plumbed up, I'm ready to fire this thing up for the first time. You can see the back wheels off. I'm also working on custom brakes. These here are out of a Volvo. They got pretty much the same size piston as the Subaru ones, but they have an integrated electric parking brake. So I can get rid of these nasty drum parking brakes that are back here and all the cables and handles that are associated with it, and use an electronic controller to control my parking brakes. I just did that because they came in and I wanted to make sure I at least thought I was going to be able to modify them to work so that I could send them back if they weren't fit. So that's what 9 hours in the garage on a Saturday gets you. I'm watching football. Baseball will be on soon. It's a good way to kill time. So yeah, I'm going to try and finish wiring up the fan tonight, and then tomorrow start on the keyless ignition and entry system.